Okay, we are now recording. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Wetham, and I am one of the program administrators at the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. I am a faculty developer, and I'd just like to introduce my co-host, Lucas Myers. Lucas is biology faculty at Lower Columbia College, and he has been teaching online biology for many, many years, including A&P and Bio 160 and other courses. Lucas, do you want to say a few words about your background? And good morning.
Good morning. I think you covered it there. I've taught a lot of different courses and started teaching online in 2013, but just excited to be here and help everybody the best we can to get everything up and running. Each discipline and sub-discipline has its own unique challenges, but it's exciting to get these things up and running for our students and faculty to have a successful spring, and I imagine summer as well as we continue into this kind of weird year.
Yeah, a weird year indeed. Lucas, thank you. I'd also like to introduce Alyssa Sills. She is my e-learning twin at the State Board. She does faculty professional development with an e-learning slant. Alyssa, do you want to just say hello in a few words? Oh, I think we just lost her. All right, well, we will, when she comes back in, we'll introduce her. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and I just wanted to add also that Lucas has another question in the chat. Lucas, do you want to speak to that? And people can type into the chat while I'm going over a couple of things.
Yeah, I just think it'd be useful if when you put down your problems, concerns, challenges, that you think about putting in there which biology quarter you're teaching in terms of major biology, whether it's 211, 212, 213, or the 221, 222, 223 series. I know that each college does something a little different, and not all of them teach them in sequence in terms of numbers. So that would be helpful, I'm sure, in terms of everybody understanding where each other are at this quarter, because some people might be dealing with comparative anatomy, physiology, and others might be looking at more of the plant anatomy, physiology, so in ecology, etc. So that'd be something to put in there for everybody to kind of get on a similar page and understanding of where we are.
All right, thank you, Lucas. And Lucas has a newborn at home, and so Lucas.
Sorry, wasn't sure if anybody heard that in the background.
No, I think it's great. I think you're modeling for us the situation that a lot of our students are going to be in. So thank you. Yeah, all of us, our students are going to be taking care of children while they are trying to take our courses. And so Lucas, I'm thrilled you're modeling this for us. Thank you.
Yeah, not by plan. It's nap time. He'll be quiet shortly, but we have 3 at home, so it's easy to empathize with everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to move on to, so I've been putting this slide, I kind of love my own joke. Let's unite separately in our own homes. It's taken from a meme that I saw on Facebook, I think, around introverts unite separately in your own homes. And so I like this idea that we are uniting separately in our own homes. So today's meeting, I wanted to do a little bit of a welcome and introductions, and I just wanted to talk for a second about why communities of practice. Our big goal today is to uncover questions, problems of practice, and challenges, especially ones that people have in common. And our proposal is, and actually this has been modified a little bit, but what we're hoping that we can do is help each other share low stakes, high impact, low tech labs that align with the learning outcomes for the majors course in biology and identify next steps. And we have a couple different models to talk about just in terms of how we can effectively share resources at this time so people don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why communities of practice as the learning model for this. So first of all, no one has to reinvent the wheel. What we're really hoping is that we could crowdsource people, many hands make light work, and that people could share resources, so that again, people can, so no one has to kind of be building a whole curriculum alone. We can also invent new solutions for challenges that haven't been addressed yet. So new solutions for these extraordinary times, and create shared resources that can be taught across the system. And another important thing that's maybe the most important is that you can find solace, comfort, and inspiration in community as we learn from and with each other. These are unique times, and so we really want to be of support to you. So what we'd like to do now is uncover our questions, challenges, and problems of practice. And I know people have already started typing into the chat around kind of what their major questions or concerns are. And again, if you haven't had a chance to yet, if you could just type in, what questions do you have right now about teaching majors biology online? And again, with the notion of how can we help each other with this work? So right away, I see from, I think maybe I'll just start with this notion of doing field work. I think this is for plants and a small group field research project across the quarter. Lucas, you're the content expert here. Do you feel like that's a good place to start? Should we start with the issue of field work and how people are addressing that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad place to start, especially with, it looks like there's a decent amount of people dealing with that in the different sections. The other one's going to be dissection work with the comparative anatomy, physiology, it looks like. But yeah, we can start with field work for sure.
And actually, let me ask this in the chat. If you could, would you prefer to start with dissection or field work? Let's just get a sense. So if you could type in either dissection or field work, that would just help me kind of just discover what is the most important thing to focus on first. Okay, thank you. We've got field. All right, so let's start with, so Cece, you're the one, Cece Crosby from Clark. Do you want to take the mic and just talk for a second about the problem of practice as you see it, the field work and your field group research project? Great. Okay, if you can unmute yourself, or I can unmute you.
Well, at Clark, we usually do a quarter-long project where we take our students out in larger groups and smaller groups out into the gorge, and then we have them actually run their own field project. And this quarter, a lot of our sites are in national forests, which are restricted and closed. You know, we can't really gather them up even outside as a group of, 30 and take them through. So we've been looking at what can we do to replace that? And I know my teaching partner is on here. I saw him pop in as well. We were thinking about maybe doing some individual, watch a plot or pick a species and drive around and look for that species and trying to do something with its habitat. But I think we're just sort of struggling with how do we replace what was essentially the major portion of this course.
Cece, this is excellent. Thank you so much for voicing kind of what you do and how you're wrapping your mind around it. I do have one clarifying question. What are the outcomes that you're normally teaching to with the way you've set up the field work?
I don't have those at the top of my brain. Let me open my course really quickly and just take a quick look at that. So I've got my syllabus in front of me.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So with that one, our big ones are looking at essentially the ecological rise of human populations, global climate change, And then also describe the factors contributing to the loss of biodiversity, analyzing different conservation strategies, describe ecological relationships between and among biota and environmental factors, and then describe factors that regulate the abundance of organisms.
Great, thank you. So the reason I asked that too is because one of the things that Lucas and I have been doing with other different groups is trying to figure out what are the shared outcomes that people are currently teaching to and assessing with their current materials and resources, and trying to figure out if there's a way that we could organize a Canvas shell so that people can post different resources that are, if not ready to go, close to being ready to go, even if they're not perfect, so that then people could, you know, share resources in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'd be happy to contribute. We've been working pretty hard in the last week or so to get stuff at least framed.
Yes, if even just the framing, I think, is super, super useful. So Lucas, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I mean, I think it's a tough one. There's a lot of faculty that do those, especially in the majors biology, where there's a lot of field work, a lot of field trips, and this quarter kind of makes that difficult. But I think there's probably people out there doing some unique things. I think your ideas around doing some plots. There's also some virtual field trips online that might be usable. They may not be local. It's always great using our gorge and different things, for sure. But there's some resources out there that I think we can use, and I'm sure other faculty have seen, to make it more manageable online.
Thank you, Lucas. And Cece, Alyssa has a suggestion. Alyssa Sells is my e-learning twin at the state board. Alyssa, do you want to unmute and just share, and maybe you and Cece can dialogue about this for a sec?
Oh, sure, Jen. I think Lucas kind of already just touched on the topic. I was just wondering, Cece, if maybe you could still go out to your site on your own and make some mini videos or a longer video of your trip and go through the normal things you would go through with students while they were out in the field, and then post those videos. And that could maybe serve as a virtual field trip, and that might get you close to what you would do with the students in person. But then Lucas mentioned that there might be some virtual field trip type things that already exist. So maybe you could check into that too. Just a thought.
I think anything that's not a national site, we would be able to get into and do a little filming. And actually, like I said, my partner, Stephen Clark, is in here too. And I'm betting that we put a lot of the get out and do some filming onto him for that, because he knows all of our sites.
Yeah, this is Stephen. I'm Cece's co-worker, and that doesn't seem like it would work to me. What students do is they actually do a little bit of field biology where they search for specimens, and I think the search and the identification of the specimens and the ecological notes, I don't see how that could be done without them being at a site. And the field work is challenging enough. We have learned that they can't do it independently. We did it independently a few years back, and that didn't work. So we have to be at the site.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And I think if I could, and Lucas, I think you might say, Jen, that's not correct. But I think one of the things in this time is to think about what are the outcomes you're trying to get to. And Cece, you did a nice job of reading through the many outcomes. And I think part of it is figuring out what are the core things that you really want students to know and be able to do to not just pass the course, but be successful in future coursework. And then maybe instead of trying to recreate what you already do, can you teach to and assess those outcomes during COVID, during this time of sheltering in place in different ways? Because Stephen, I agree with you that you can't, a lot of what you do right now in the face-to-face environment just can't be replicated in online. So it's, again, trying to figure out how can you teach to those outcomes using a different modality, using different resources. Lucas, do you want to say anything about that? Like,
I think you're right. I mean, I think this is a unique situation. I think it'll be going back to So what are you trying to get the students to get to? And if there are specific organisms that they generally find and identify, is there another way of getting them to look at that and look at population factors, and can we pull in data from different sites? So there's different ways. I'm sure all of these faculty have done in a variety of ways. It's because it's going to be hard to replicate any of these field situations. Just like I'm teaching an exercise physiology class online, and there's no way I can do a VO2 max test in their living room. So it's figuring out how we adapt to these situations to still meet those learning outcomes. So I think you said it perfectly, Jen.
Thanks. So Katie has an idea around maybe looking to citizen science opportunities that would get students out collecting data at least. Cornell's celebrating urban birds. The UW is doing a bird survey around COVID-19, and there are some pollinator studies as well. And she apologizes that these are animal and not plant. And so I think before we move to animal, let's maybe stick with plant. And I hope that I'm doing this right. I hope I'm saying this right. I noticed that Lisa Carlson, who's part of our botany group, has suggested budburst. And also, I guess from Lisa, who was part of the botany group, and Lucas, who was also a participant in that meeting, is there anything that might be transferable from that botany discussion when we talk about majors with plants and replicating field or creating conditions for students to get this to the same outcomes without having to do field work? Lisa, maybe if you don't mind unmuting, do you want to, is there anything that you could speak to?
Yeah, one thing, I don't use this specifically, but others in the group were talking about using the online herbarium at the Burke Museum for lots of images of species and doing a lot of identification and taxonomy. But that's certainly not the same as doing fieldwork for ecology. The Project Budburst that I mentioned is phenology, so it relates more to ecology. But I don't have any recollection of anything that would fit as well for like doing population surveys and the ecological communities that you're looking for.
Thank you, Lisa, for that. I can see that Mithia is posting about iNaturalist. Mithia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Would you like to unmute and maybe share some highlights that you're posting into the chat?
Sure.
Hi. Thank you.
Of course, of course. iNaturalist has some interesting filters on it that anyone can do posting. There's some requirements that it be a wild specimen and not a cultivated specimen or a domesticated animal. But these sightings are mapped all over the world and also all over Washington State. And so you could filter, if you're interested in, I don't know, dicots or monocots, or you're interested in conifers, or, so you can filter, you can have your students filter for different specimens, for different habitats. You can apply a layer for a certain number of years. So you could see how maybe sightings were changing over time. Or even over time within a single habitat. There's literally hundreds of thousands of postings, and they establish what's called a research grade. So there's experts on iNaturalist that are constantly checking in on postings. And so let's say I took a photograph of, I don't know, a California quail. That posting gets identified by 3 other kind of experts in the field and becomes a research grade. So it basically means that a number of eyes have viewed the posting and agree on its genus and species. And so there's some accountability to the postings. But there's a lot of data and really interesting information that students might be able to glean from that site. And instructors can set up projects. So like I have a project set up in the wetlands area where we would typically be out in the field doing field work and monitoring projects. But instead we'll be doing postings from our yards.
Mithia, first of all, thank you. That is a wealth of amazing information. And one thing I'd like to ask is, do you have assignments or resources that you would be willing to share around how you are using iNaturalist? Like if we created a shared Canvas shell, would you be willing to share resources?
Yeah, not a problem.
That would be awesome. Because one thing that Lucas and I have been learning as we convene these groups is that in the early stages, it was sort of like, okay, let's just share, kind of like links with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I'm hearing from faculty is just give me some basic, bare bones about how you're using it. So then people can kind of look at it and say, oh, okay, I teach to the same outcomes. It's a little bit more ready to go. Does that make sense?
Totally. Complete sense. Yeah. Otherwise a link is just really overwhelming because you have to kind of synthesize what all is there.
And again, like I'm trying to remember the term I read on Facebook. It's a joke term about like a surprise epiphany. For other people that was like a no-brainer, but for me, I was like, oh right, like people just the way that you said that, like a link can be really overwhelming because in the early weeks I was just sending people links. So thank you for your thoughts on this and being willing to share.
Sure.
I also see that Lucas has posted Zooniverse as a citizens research site. And Stephanie Hoffman and her colleague Danny Najira at Green River also have some stuff to contribute, some materials. Stephanie, can I call on you to kind of speak?
Yep. So we got Danny to join the botany group, though he has requested that I be our outreach person. So he has some fancy cameras that let him put together sort of an immersive picture experience, kind of like when you use the like you can drag around on Google Maps from like a person's perspective. So he's created these snapshots where he's going to be going out into the woods still, and he will the camera produces this image, and then he's adding enlarged photos of specific plants that we want students to focus on. So they can see both the natural setting that the plant is found in, and then they can click and see enlarged images of the specific structures that we want them to be able to identify. And then I believe he has plans to basically do a virtual field trip using his fancy cameras. And he is very willing to upload all of this to whatever shared resource we create.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. And also please extend, as the spokesperson, please extend my gratitude to Danny for being so willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking through the chat, and again, in the name of things that could be used immediately with very little modification, Lucas, I'm wondering if you could speak to the Nanus and the Nanus Data Explorer, and it seems like this also might be a ready to go sort of thing.
Yeah, Nanus is I don't know if anybody's used Nanus at all, but Nanus is a great setup of data. It's a great database that has all sorts of information along the Puget Sound, the Washington coastline, and the Columbia River at different sensors that collects pH, turbidity. It looks at a lot of different chemical makeups of the water, connected to microorganisms in the water as well, looking at photosynthesis and those sort of things. And so it's a great place to, one, create labs where you can ask inquiry-based questions and have people start examining that. There's some great research information out there around shellfish as well connected to it, because you can look at the pH and different things and how they're farming shellfish and how the makeup of the Puget Sound or the Washington coastline is impacting the shellfish farming. And they can use those numbers to predict what they're going to get in order to how they're going to farm their shellfish. So there's a lot of data there that can be used, and it's really simple to get on there and access the information. And you can really easily put together some questions if you've worked in that kind of field before. I don't have any specific assignments created, but I think from our work with ISB, Jen,
Yeah.
there are faculty who created some really good assignments around that. I think I might have one. I don't know that it would be majors biology ready. I think I used it in my Biology 100 class. But I think there's faculty out there that used it more extensively that we could reach out to. I want to say one of the faculty at Wenatchee Valley had some good assignments around that data set. So that's something we could look at. The other one is Zooniverse. Zooniverse has some really good, you can jump right into working on these citizen science research projects. Like I just pulled up one where you actually are observing robins and doing some notes and sending in information on sightings and nesting and latitude and longitude and different things right to Cornell's lab. And it's through Zooniverse. Zooniverse is kind of a giant database for all these citizen science research projects you can sign up for that might fit in really well with some of these as a replacement for some of these field trips, field work in an online setting.
Lucas, thank you. And I really appreciate the idea of that we link back to the work that was done by faculty around with the Institute for Systems Biology. And we do have a lot of data sets especially if folks are interested in maybe taking a big data approach to your curriculum, just maybe during COVID-19, this might be a good thing to experiment with. Lisa Carlson has posted to the chat, there's a virtual visit to the South Thurston Prairies. And I did want to go back to a quote from CC about where general ecology course, so animal survey is quite usable. That is excellent. I am wondering if, I think we've mostly been talking, I think, about plant. Lucas, correct me if I'm wrong. What solutions are people thinking about for animal? And Lucas, correct me if I'm wrong about this.
I don't think you're wrong per se. I think there's a variety of things that go into some of those third quarter sequences. It's not just plants. There's ecology and other organisms that I think a lot of them are looking at. So it's a collection. So and those who speak majors biology those who teach majors biology on a regular basis can speak to this, but there's each quarter is a little bit different. And so some people looks like are teaching the comparative anatomy physiology, which is going to be a much different course than what we've been talking about, which is more ecology, maybe plant identification, some of the different things that are occurring in that quarter. So it's two different courses for sure.
Okay. So maybe so I see from Christy that Christy, you're teaching 223 animal and then plant physiology. And so you are teaching that third quarter of the year-long sequence. Okay. Yes. Okay. So Christy, what can we do? What are you struggling with right now? I think, can you say a few words? Okay. So Christy is asking for online testing and online labs. I am wondering, for how many people, Lucas, the thing that you were talking about with anatomy and like with the physiology, I'm wondering if we want to talk about that particular, like what are solutions around that?
Yeah, and I think it's going to vary. It'd be interesting to hear what people normally do in these classes, because I think there's consistency in terms of general content, but I don't know that there's consistency across the system in terms of how some of these courses are covered, just because there's a lot of information in each quarter. So it'd be interesting to see what is normally done in some of these classes and what kind of the outcomes are, and when we're talking about anatomy and plant physiology and what they're trying to replace.
Okay. So Christy, I know that you wrote online testing and online labs into the chat. Do you mind unmuting, and can you tell us a little bit about what you usually do?
Hi. So normally we start with the 2/3 of it is on the animal physiology, and we go through all the organ systems, all the cardiovascular, respiratory, nervous system, etc. Then we go into embryology, and then we wrap up with plant physiology. And so in the past, a lot of our labs did use some PhysioX. So actually I've been trying to adapt that. And then we did on campus, we dissected a heart, and we did all the plant stuff on campus in the lab, like a photosynthesis lab and other labs, transpiration labs, labs that we talked a little bit about yesterday the other day in botany. So my students actually have Connect to McGraw-Hill, so I've been using some of those virtual labs, but they're just small and totally different. So I found just that's been hard for me, is trying to find the right resources to give them some good, like in the brain and brain parts of the brain and resources. Just trying to nail down the resources that could help them with that. And then I guess for me, like right now with everything I've assigned, everybody it's the majors biology, and the third quarter here, they're all pretty serious, and they all have like 100% in my class so far. So with the testing, I gave them a practice test, and they all did really well on that. Because I'm not monitoring them, I don't feel like I can charge for honors lock at this point or something like that. So just struggling with how to make the tests real. And I liked somebody put they're not even giving tests, they're just doing quizzes. So I was trying to think about that. I'm just sort of flustered.
Christy, thank you so much for sharing with us kind of, how you're wrapping your mind around this. And I think it is useful for folks to hear in any situation, pandemic or no, how people teach the course, what they teach. I did want to say that from an equity perspective, and also from just a practice perspective, I would definitely say, if it were me, I would try to stay away from HonorLock and Lockdown Respondus browser, only because I've been hearing some pretty interesting things from faculty. Like I heard one biology faculty member say that she was like watching, and Lucas, I think you and Alyssa were on the call when she was telling us this, that like one student was trying to take an exam and the smoke detector went off and she couldn't leave the room because because the alarm was going off. And then another student was, trying to tell a small child, just wait, I just have 10 more questions to answer. Not to mention, kind of student privacy issues. And so I think if there's any way that you could either do different kinds of assessments, like small group work, like there's lots of, and Alyssa has, I think, lots and lots of great ideas about different kinds of assessments. And also, like if you are doing, tests, maybe making them open book, open note. I hope that makes sense. Lucas, what do you want to say about different kinds of assessments and all, in this COVID-19 environment?
Yeah, I think that providing a variety of assessment tools is good. It's definitely going to be difficult with as much activity as there is online, using HonorLock, Respondus, all these different things, that there's going to be problems. I'm sure different people's internet speed, not to mention, you heard my child yelling already earlier today, crying. So think about someone who's trying to take a test and they're trying to take care of their kids and homeschool. So I think there's going to be a lot more stress than normal. And so it's about finding that balance. If you like having exams, how do you make them into small chunks, short quizzes, timed? If you're worried about cheating, let them have a page of notes. It gets rid of that. Then, you don't have to worry about that kind of integrity. But there's all sorts of other ways, as a lot of you are posting in the chat, to get to outcomes and to get learning done. And that's inquiry-based stuff. It's It's essays, although then you got to grade them. It's case studies. You know, National Case Study Collection site has amazing case studies on a ton of biology fields. So there's all sorts of ways you can be creative. I think doing chunking content this quarter is going to be really important, more than ever in an online class, and having flexibility for your students is going to be really important as well.
And I think too, this is one of the reasons we really wanted to have a community of practice that met fairly regularly, because obviously we can't solve all the things in one meeting. And so Christy, I would love to see maybe this group continue to meet to talk about what are some alternative assessments. I know Alyssa has, you know, tons and tons of ideas. And so if we could do another meeting where maybe we just talk about alternative assessment modes, and then also create a Canvas shell where people can share resources so that, again, nobody has to reinvent the wheel. So with that, given that it's 11:37, one thing that I think has been really profound, again, another stupid epiphany, another stupiphany for me has been that it's useful to come up with some kind of consensus around how we want to organize the Canvas shell. So for example, with the A&P faculty, Lucas Myers, Lucas, who's helping today, talked about what are the 5 major systems that are currently taught in A&P in Bio 241 and Bio 242. So those faculty are organizing in that way. For the chemistry faculty, it turned out that Chem 110 is causing a lot of people heartache and headache. And as well as OChem, especially like the upper division OChem courses. And so that's how we're organizing the Canvas shell. In botany on Friday, transpiration was a big kind of commonly taught to outcome. The way I phrased it isn't an outcome, but they were swapping ideas about how to teach to and assess transpiration. So maybe if we could shift to what are the, like when you think about organizing a Canvas shell so people can post resources that are easy to find, that are not just a link that's overwhelming, what are some of the concepts we might want to organize ourselves around? And people can either type into the chat or speak. Stephen, I see your hand is raised. Do you have anything?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I did not mean to raise my hand.
Oh, you're all good. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so go ahead. Okay, so Cece says we are starting with a weekly format, 1 topic, chapter per week, opening Friday to Friday. So Cece, what are the organizing concepts of the week? What are some of the topics or chapters?
I think we're using more or less our regular structure for that. But they're actually going to start out with a unit on viral biology. I'm going to try and frame a lot of our work around the crisis that we're in now, because I think it'll be a good kind of chance for all of us to get a better feel for what's going on. And a lot of the topics that we have can tie back into COVID biology as well. So we've got them starting out with some basic viral structure and function. And
well, Cece, if I could jump in, there is a chapter on viruses and virology, but we're jumping in on the immunology. So the body response to it.
Right.
But everything else you said is true. It'll tie in well, and it'll probably satisfy a lot of interest on their part too.
And then we'll kind of transition into, I think we do cell division and genetics next, and then we look into sort of ecological principles, evolutionary principles, and then usually we sort of tie that all together back into our outdoor project. So we're going to use the same set of chapters with a few revisions, but essentially they'll have 1 or 2 chapters per week with a structured reading, a set of small mini lectures, a lab project that ties into that, and then a quiz at the end of the week that'll wrap up all of our testing. So the idea being that you've got a Friday to Friday chunk where you can work your way through and kind of get everything completed in that week, and then the next week will open.
So I am really loving this notion of contextualizing your content and outcomes to COVID-19 whenever possible. Obviously, given the situation, there's a lot of misinformation floating around. So being able to create high quality learning experiences for students that help them navigate the world outside of the classroom, I think is such a great idea. And I was also part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion work group that met on Friday. And one of the participants was saying how important it is for systemically non-dominant students is to contextualize. So and again, if you would be willing to share, especially your contextualized materials, I think that would be so important to everyone, your colleagues, other students.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it's not made yet because I'm working on Bio 160 as well. So things are going to be popping up more or less as I need them. The other thing that we're doing with ours to help with assessment is they've got the set of required materials that we just laid out, but we're also doing a chance for those who maybe struggle with the online quiz format to do some extra work. So we're planning on having some smaller point value assignments that are essentially optional that they can work on to recover some quiz points or other things, so long as they complete them Friday to Friday. So the idea being that there's a pool of, I think we were talking about maybe a pool of 40 points, and an A student could get all of them just by doing kind of the required materials that are set out if they do them well. A student who doesn't do those well or who struggles with those would have some options to do other activities, which of course are open to everybody, that would allow them to then recover a portion of the points that they might lose in a quiz or by missing an assignment or something else as well.
That seems like, to me, that seems like a very compassionate strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas and Alyssa, do you have any feedback on this sort of assessment strategy? Or anyone? I love it. I think it sounds awesome. And again, compassionate.
Yeah, I think it's great. It kind of moves towards some of that contract style grading. It really puts more ownership in the student as well in a good way. It gives them the opportunity to take good responsibility over their learning in a situation where they can have control over it and in a way that's beneficial to them. So I like it a lot, and I think any way we can be creative this quarter is really good. And I like the idea of contextualizing a lot of our content if we teach something that allows us to around the COVID and what's going on.
Yeah. Thank you. So Lucas, what do we need to gather from this group? So what I'm hoping is that folks will be amenable to scheduling another meeting. And if we could decide on a day and time, maybe even consistently, that we could work together, that would be awesome. I can create a Canvas shell, but Lucas, do we have the right information to start creating an effective Canvas shell where people can share resources effectively?
I think we have some. I think that was my next question, was what would our Canvas space need to look like? It sounds like for this group, it could be around course because there's just a few different types of courses they're being taught. We could just build out both sequences, all 211, 212, 213, 221, 222, 223, and then under each of those have different subtopics. We could do it that way if people were interested in having it done that way. It seems like most of the concern is around assessments and how do we deal with the physiology, comparative anatomy, physiology in the lab, as well as the field work. So those are also 3 areas we could be focusing on Canvas right now. It's up to me, it'd be up to them, but those are the things that I hear coming across in how we're going to organize the space.
So could folks type into the chat, yes, like, so here are the options. Yes, that sounds like a good idea for organizing the Canvas shell, at least temporarily. No, and maybe an alternate suggestion, or yes, and what else would you like to see in terms of making sure we can share resources effectively? Okay, we've got a lot of yeses. Think that'd be a good start. Okay, cool. So the next piece of information I think I would like is your email addresses to make sure that I have everyone's email. And I do have a master list of emails for this group, but I want to make sure I have you on this particular majors listserv, and also get you added to the Canvas shell. And then I think the next thing I'd like to know is if we have a weekly meeting, is this day and time, Mondays at 11, is this a workable time for folks? Or would we prefer to see something else? CC, this time works. Okay, Monday at 11 works. Okay. And we'll always record the meeting, and I will post it to the Canvas shell with, and also I haven't been I haven't provided captions, but I will be sure to make sure everything is captioned. Stephen, I don't know how times will work until after the first week of classes. Okay, that's fine. It sounds like Monday at 11 is working for most people in the group. So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and schedule next week's meeting for Monday at 11. And at that point, we can review what's been posted to the Canvas shell. And we could also talk more about assessments, about assessment strategies. Does that seem like a good plan to folks?
And Jen, I just wanted to let everybody know, as we get this Canvas space set up and people add to it, if you're not sure based on the way it's organized where it goes or whatever, you can just post it and I'll be checking them periodically to make sure we keep them organized. So just post it the best you can, and then I will make sure we have good text headers, et cetera, to keep everything organized. And if you see something that needs to be organized, just do it. This is a shared space for you guys to have the opportunity to go in and use resources, share resources in an efficient manner. So make sure you know that you have ownership, but also know if you don't have time, I'll be checking it periodically and updating the organization side of it.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you. I think one more thing that I'll just say, from other groups, is done is better than perfect. And even posting, Stephen, was that you?
Yeah, I think that's I think it's a good idea, and we also have to recognize students are going to be in the same boat. They're gonna submit things and make errors, and we're just not good at this yet, and it's unrealistic to expect us to be good. And I think it's defeating to feel bad when it's not outstanding. We're going to do as well as we can, as quickly as we can, but that's it.
Yes, I love that. And I think Lucas's colleague, Katrina Fuller, has been teaching online for a really long time, and she has really beautiful resources for microbiology. And, and again, she was like, well, it's not ready yet. I think for a lot of faculty, we are scared to share things because we know it's not perfect. And I guess too, in any conditions, it will never be perfect. It's just, that's why continuous improvement is a thing. You're always tinkering. And CC is writing, and people in a traumatic situation respond differently to mistakes. Yes, CC, compassion is key. Yes, so we want to be compassionate to our students and compassionate to ourselves, and also compassionate to our colleagues. I know I've been stretched and challenged in ways that I never imagined. Alyssa is also saying too, for consistency, maybe think about the assessments you share in terms of purpose, task, and criteria for success, which is the TILT framework, Transparency in Learning and Teaching. Alyssa and I are happy to help people as well. If you are new to the TILT framework, or sometimes even just getting a disciplinary outsider's eyes on your assignment can be really useful. Yes, and Cece, Cece, do you want to say what you wrote into the chat? I think it's really beautiful.
Sure, I was just pointing out, I've been doing a lot of reading around trauma-informed education lately. And one of the things that we need to remember is that we're not just educators right now, we're also a potential anchor point during kind of the craziness that's going on around us. A lot of our students are probably going to be using our classes, not just for education, but as, you know, something to do that feels normal. And if we can remember that and be compassionate with them, we have a greater potential for impact this quarter than we know, I think.
Beautifully said. Thank you to both of you, Cece and Stephen. Your students are very lucky. And all of our students are lucky because you're all here in this meeting figuring out solutions. So I think before we sign off, is there anything, it's 11:52, we have 8 minutes left. Is there anything that we haven't addressed that people would like us to address right now? Go ahead and type into the chat or take the mic. What else should we talk about? Or what other questions or issues do you want to bring to the table?
This is Stephen. Can I offer something?
Please.
It's going to sound cynical, but I'm saying it in the spirit of, might be good to say it. A big part of me feels like this quarter will be substantially less beneficial than previous quarters. And I don't think that's avoidable. And I think I'm not approaching this quarter as how can I give my students what I gave them last year at this time. I don't think I can. I'm convinced I can't do that. And I think that informs my work a little bit, because I have to stop somewhere, and I'm going to stop kind of with the best I can do, but I'm not really, even after listening to these helpful and well-meaning ideas, most of them leave significant gaps between what we've done in the past.
Stephen, thank you for offering that. And Lucas, I know you have taught online for a long time, and I know that we've had this discussion in the STEM-focused lifeboat sessions. Do you want to speak to this?
No, I think that I think that's where a lot of people are, and I think that's a correct assessment in the fact that you're not going to be able to mirror what you do in class. And we also have limited time to plan, so it won't be what you did last spring. And I think that's a good place to start mentally, and then flip over to, okay, what do I got to do to make it meaningful? I think, and Cece got at this, I think while our courses for some, I'm lucky because I've been teaching anatomy physiology online for a number of years, so I'm trying to do different things for my face-to-face that didn't choose online, but it isn't as hasty as a lot of people are having to plan their online courses. And so I think what we have to realize is, how do we just do our best this quarter to plan a course that's effective for what we need and the best we can do. And I think, Stephen, you're going right after that. And I think the other part is, while it may not be perfect in terms of content or strategy, I think that it'll be meaningful. And I think this is what Cece was getting at. This may be meaningful in so many other ways that we don't even realize for our students. And I think we have the opportunity to provide that environment for our students in just a place where they can come and continue to progress, because we're living in a situation where I'm sure a lot of people feel like there is no progress. There is no momentum for us. And so I think this is an environment where we can create a space for them. And so I think there will be so much meaning in other ways than just our content. But I think, Stephen, you're totally right. And you should feel comfortable where you are in thinking about that. And then if you continue to plan this online class for a few years, you might get it to where you want it to be. And that's kind of the way online learning is. I taught Biology 160 for years. And it took me 5 years to get that class where I felt like it was where I wanted it to be as an online biology class. So
Exactly. Well
I
said.
think you're good.
And I think Alyssa, oh, Katie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add something. I know the same as many of you, teaching multiple classes that are completely different. So I simply don't have time to change everything. So for my 212, I'm just going to focus on trying to do really meaningful, engaging labs as much as I can. And maybe not worry so much about changing my assessment and worrying about cheating, because I simply don't have time to change everything, and I just have to pick a few things. So for me, it's going to be the labs.
Yes, and again, like you said, focusing your attention on, not trying to do everything, but just thinking about, if I heard you right, like just thinking about what can I focus my attention on to get maximum results for my focused investment of time. And again, too, I just want to also say that one of the biggest potentials here is that we could share resources and strategies so that for folks who don't have time to change everything, you don't have to. You could just take something that someone else did that's really cool and use it, and know that they're going to use the thing that you created that's really cool. So Katie, as you do your very good work on labs, I hope you'll be willing to share them with this group, and same for them. Go ahead, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, absolutely, sharing them.
Yes to sharing in this time. And I did want to say too that this afternoon we are going to host another conversation at 1:00 for Bio ampersand 160. And I think there are a ton of resources that have already been created. So for those of you who are teaching 160, if I could just say one thing, and Lucas and Alyssa, feel free to correct me. But one of my thoughts is that in the lower level bio courses, there's lots of people who have already done work in that space. So if you are teaching Bio 160 and the majors courses, I would really try to focus my efforts, if I were you, on creating new and innovative solutions to the majors conundrums, because that's where the adaptive challenges are. That's where really the solutions maybe haven't been created in the way that the solutions have already been created for Bio 160. So there's lots of kind of plug and play solutions that are aligned with best practice for Bio 160, not so much for this more unexplored area of majors bio. Lucas, would you say that's correct or incorrect or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody may feel that way in terms of 160 being in that situation, but having been around a lot of different kind of communities of practice, whether it be the undergraduate research, the ISB, or just e-learning in general, there is a ton of resources and just courses already made for Biology 160 out there that can be easily gathered and used. And I think the majors for sure is definitely more complicated and difficult. Sorry, my wife's moving some dishes behind me. A more complicated and difficult course to get ready. So I think what you're saying is exactly right.
And we are here to support you if it doesn't feel like 160 is manageable. And Cece, thanks for pointing that out. It's at 3 p.m. I am so sorry. It is at 3 p.m. today. And if you didn't receive a personal Outlook invite from me, then that means your name isn't on my 160 list. So please type your email into the chat so I can add you to the 160 group. And please spread the word with your bio faculty that we'll be having this meeting at on 160 at 3 o'clock. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, I am going to stop the recording. But before I do that, I want to say thanks to Lucas, thanks to Alyssa, and thanks to all of you who shared such valuable information and insights, and also just your I think this has been a really lovely conversation around what reality looks like, and also the compassion for ourselves and for students. Lucas or Alyssa, is there anything you want to add before we close?
Just this was really great, Jen. I really appreciate that you're doing this. I appreciate Lucas doing this. I think it's been really, really useful.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I did want to say too, I thought just because it's different doesn't mean it can't be meaningful and effective. And I just want to say to everyone, Alyssa has the most knowledge of anyone I know about how to take what you do, like in terms of outcomes, and really think creatively and expansively in an online space. And she gives me great hope that anything is possible. So Alyssa, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, you're awesome.
You are too.
All right, everybody. Thank you again. And I look forward to seeing many of you again today at 3. Also this week, we will be having, we're going to have an online physics faculty meeting tomorrow at 11. And we are also going to have an engineering faculty meeting on Wednesday at 3:30. And we have a chemistry faculty meeting on Thursday, April 16th at 11 a.m. So, and I'm working with faculty to get more of these organized. So please spread the word that the State Board is supporting communities of practice for STEM faculty. We really want to be here for you during this time. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.